Hello. Hi. Hey everybody. Gosh, I am so excited to see you guys. I am just popping into the studio and making sure that everything is working okay. So bear with me for just 1 second. And we will get started because you guys sent me some amazing clues. And I am just super excited to talk with you guys. Oh my goodness. Okay. So not seeing any comments coming through yet, but yeah, I do see that people are watching. So this is going to be so fun. Okay. So sorry guys. I'm just going to take a second to click over to YouTube and just make sure that everything seems to be working. And yep, everything is live, everything is working. And oh, Meredith, so glad to see you. And Aquarius Al and Korean Lover for Life. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad to get to live stream with you guys again. And yeah, I asked for questions just yesterday. Just yesterday, I decided that I really needed to do a live stream because I could not get the video I had planned for today up in time. And so I send out an emergency call for questions to give me something to talk about. And you guys really came through. I have, I think, a dozen really fun, really interesting questions here that I cannot wait to get into. So thank you guys so much. And yeah, I just want to give things a couple more minutes. No, maybe just one more minute so that people can join and not miss the beginning because we really have some great questions to talk about here. Oh, and Lennox Williams art. Oh, and Luca is here. Awesome. Good to see you. And Avion, awesome. All right. All right. Cool. Okay. So let's just dig into the questions, shall we? So the first question was from Jeremy, and Jeremy asks, do you have any recommendations for locked room mystery stories? I love those, and I'm always on the lookout for more. So to be honest, the best recommendations I have for locked room mysteries are going to be on television programs, and most particularly, you'll see a lot of them in Monk. I have a few yeah, I have a few episodes that I can point you to if you want to see some really great locked room mysteries. And that's Mr. Monk in the Panic Room, Mr. Monk meets the Playboy, Monk is underwater, Monk goes to Vegas, Monk goes to the carnival, and Monk and the Redheaded Stranger. All of those are great locked room mysteries. And then Murder, She Wrote, I just watched a great locked room murder on Murder, She Wrote, which was We're Off to Kill the Wizard. And those are all, you know, really fun locked room mysteries that kind of explore all the different possible solutions you can possibly have to a locked room. You know what? There was a Remington Steele I watched again recently, and trying to think of the title, because of course they all have steel in them, so it's so hard to remember which was which. If I think of the name of that locked room, I will type it into the chat. But yeah, I have not read as many locked room mysteries though. And so I did actually, Jeremy, go looking for a list of locked room mysteries to share with you. But most of the lists I found online were really sharing snowbound mysteries, like, and then there were none, which I wouldn't consider a locked room. I would consider a locked room mystery to be one in which there is one or perhaps two people in an inaccessible location. And I'm gonna go back to that banner. One or perhaps two people in the inaccessible location, and so the suspect pool is extremely small, and it is a mystery about how did this person manage to commit this crime. So most of my examples are from TV, but they are some really good ones. So I hope you will check those out. I'm just going to click over to comments really quickly. Oh, I see Pamela's here from Texas. my favorite state because, of course, that's where I'm from. Oh, okay. And Luca has a question. So I'm going to circle back to that one in just a minute. Um, hmm. Okay, so Avion says, would murder takes the bus from Murder She Wrote count as a locked room murder? It was on a bus. So that sounds to me more like a snowbound mystery. A snowbound mystery is where we have kind of a secluded area. Um, the police are perhaps not able to get there, and but we still have a wide group of suspects, perhaps 10 or 12. I would consider a locked room fewer than that, but it these names are not really necessarily things that we should stay beholden to. If you wanted to write a locked murder on a bus, I think that would be totally cool, and you don't have to be too hidebound with exactly what kind of situation you consider to be exactly what kind of mystery. Um, mhm. Okay, I see more questions coming in. So I am going to get to these, but I do want to get oh, okay. So Aquarius Al says cards on the table is a good locked room of sorts. Okay, cool. That is good to look up. We will look that up. Okay, I do see a couple of questions coming in, and I am going to get to those. Let's see. Let me do just one more of the questions from the comments, and then actually no, let's do the questions from the comments before we do the pre-submitted questions, just because you're here now and you want to learn. So that's awesome. Okay, so Luca says, I'm writing a comedy musical whodunit play, and the reveal for the killer has no clues. What clues should I do? Um, well, let's talk about the purpose of clues. So, at the end of your mystery novel, you want people to have that that, amazing. I didn't see that coming feeling, but you also don't want them to feel like, well, that came out of nowhere. I had literally no idea where that was coming from. The clue is the thing that their mind, as soon as you do your reveal, the clue is the thing that their mind will race back to say, of course it was this person because of this clue. I should have seen that. I just didn't put it together. So we want to be subtle with our clues, but we don't want to leave them out because the feeling of being surprised by the villain is a really good feeling for mystery readers. The feeling of uh being feeling validated in your deductions is also a good feeling for mystery readers. So don't be too afraid to I think we often have a horror of allowing people to guess our solution. Um but I think guessing the solution and being right is actually a good experience, whereas having had no clue, having nothing to go back to and nothing to kind of shore up this ending and make it make sense is a bad experience for everyone. So I would lean toward more clues rather than well, not necessarily more clues, but I do want to make sure that I have enough clues to kind of disrupt every significant lie the villain has told and to clearly tie them to the crime. Um, so, Luca, I'm not sure exactly what clues you need for yours, but I would look in those two areas: disrupting the villain's lies and tying him very clearly to the crime or to the crime scene. Um, let's see. And Hot Rod asks, can you recommend some of the best murder mystery films? Um, gosh. I mean, I genuinely love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's super old, but it's really fun, and it has a great arc for the sleuth. It has a terrific mystery. It's great. I'm trying to think. I mean, And Then There Were None is also a classic, and there are numerous films and miniseries that follow And Then There Were None. Um, I would also look into some of the Poirot films. Any of those are generally good. Let's see. Yeah. And then I'm trying to think whether I want to recommend the most recent Poirot film, which was Death on the Nile, starring Kenneth Branagh, which was good. Um, I feel like they made some changes right around the murder that make a little bit less sense, but I can't really explain without spoiling the whole thing. So no, it's good. It's a really fun watch. I would recommend that. Okay, I am going to do a few. Let's see. I'm going to do a few more of my questions that were pre-submitted. Um, okay, so how did you do your actually, let me read the full question here. Hmm. Okay. Not safe. And anyway, how did I do my research for the Black Rose murders? I mean, a lot of different places. I read biographies. So originally I thought Al Capone might be a character. So I read a biography of him, and then he wound up not being a character, but the things I learned sort of informed what I was going to write anyway. I read books about the city of Chicago. I have this really cool book here, which is Chicago Then and Now, and it kind of shows what it looks like now versus what it looked like at the time. There we go. Anyway, it's a really cool book, and it kind of, just gives you a flavor of the time. I went to Chicago, and let's see. And I read a lot of books about kind of what everyday life was like at the time. And then another resource I want to mention is newspapers.com, which is it's a subscription site. So I don't always have a subscription to it, but periodically I do. And yeah, it's super cool. It just I can go through old editions of the Chicago Tribune from right at the time, and that kind of lets me see how things were perceived at the time, and maybe what leads the police were following on some particularly high profile case that never really made it into the history books because they were only followed for a short time, but they're interesting to me, and I think they're interesting to my readers. So that's a really great resource. Another resource I often mention when I talk about historicals is just the Social Security site. Yeah, it's ssa.gov. Social Security Administration.gov, and they have lists of most popular baby names by decade. So that is how I usually name my characters. I will just pick out an appropriate decade for when I think the character would have been born, and then scroll through, and sooner or later something hits that feels really timely for when the character was born, but it also feels right for the character. And if I were to start researching a historical novel now, the other resource I would really dig into is YouTube. And the reason for that is, there are videos on anything you want to learn, any period of history you want to follow. You can find videos on it. And I find it just nice to have some of those visuals in my mind. And then I can dig into a dense historical tome, and I've just got some pictures in my mind. I've got something to Well, it just helps me tie everything together and keeps it a little bit more interesting for me. So, those are the resources I would recommend for people who are interested in writing historical. And I encourage all of you to just, read history whenever you can, because history is just stories that you're allowed to write fan fiction about and get paid for. So, uh, let's see. Yeah, so again, this is sort of a follow-up question on this. Black Rose Murders is set during the Jazz Age. Are there any other historical periods you would be interested in exploring? I mean, it might be faster to ask what are the historical periods, which I am not interested in exploring, because I do love history. So here are some of the periods I am interested in, that I actually have plans for, but we'll probably not get to all of them. I I am currently writing a book in early America, so 1801. That's Murder, Mr. Hamilton, and it is a time travel mystery in which my character goes back in time and falls in love with Philip Hamilton, the doomed son of Alexander Hamilton. So that's a period I've enjoyed digging into. I'm also really interested in Renaissance Italy, ancient Japan, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, especially ancient Rome at the time when the Christian church was first starting to develop. Um, and probably like at least 90% of historical writers out of there, I do kind of have a thing for World War II. All right. So here's another really interesting question. How do you fit clues and red herrings into a mystery short story that is one below 5K? Okay. So let's first just talk about what a red herring is. Uh, when I talk about red herrings, what I like to call them is suspect subplots. Each suspect constitutes one subplot, and the subplot begins when we first get curious about that suspect, when we first think, what she said there was weird, or I don't really believe her alibi. And it continues as we accumulate clues about her, and then it ends when we dismiss her from suspicion. So the way to do this briefly would be to simply shorten all these up. Just take out those clues in the middle, and it's just begin and end. So, for example, we just talked a little bit ago about Death on the Nile, the Kenneth Branagh movie, starring Kenneth Branagh, and the protagonist is Hercule Poirot. So, in that, some of the suspect subplots are exactly one scene long. We bring a couple of characters who were on the murder takes place on a boat. So we bring a couple of characters who were on the boat in to talk with Poirot. He quickly figures out their secret and dismisses them from suspicion. And it's a one scene suspect subplot. So that would be the way to do it. I still think, though, that even doing that, it is hard to get down to 15K and still have a couple of suspect subplots. So you could consider very short suspect subplots, perhaps just two, and then do your big reveal. But other possible ways would be to write a mystery story that is not a whodunit. A howdunit, that is a locked room murder or a perfect alibi murder, can be a lot briefer because we don't have to maintain those extra suspects, which means we don't have to include those extra subplots. So that would be a possibility, doing a howdunit. And then also, we should consider the fact that a lot of mystery short stories are not, in fact, really whodunits or howdunits. They're really just crime stories. So, we learn that a character has pushed another character off a building. That's the beginning of the story. And there's really no mystery about who's done it. But the story is a interview between your sleuth and the villain, in which the big reveal will be, well, why did he do it? What is his psychology that made this happen? So that is another way to do a short mystery story, is to have the mystery be about um, motive, or just about some little twist that enabled the mystery, or caused it to come about, some trigger in this person's past that caused them to commit this crime at this time. Um, and that can be very brief. So that can be a way to do a short mystery story. So I'm going to check back with the comments. Let's see. Uh, let's see. Valeria says, how can I edit or rewrite my drafts when I have the whole plot in my head and I feel like I am too close to see it with fresh eyes? Then you need another pair of eyes, I think. So what I would suggest is a critique partner or a critique group who can look at your book and just kind of give you a heads up on things that aren't making sense, things that aren't seeming important to them, things that they're having a hard time connecting with emotionally, um, and things that are confusing them. So that is kind of, yeah, in particular, things that are confusing them is something that you will never be able to see with your own eyes, because it's clear to you what happened and why this person did it, even if you have not completely conveyed that information on the page. So it's great to get those beta readers, and after that point, then you do have to sit down and kind of edit and incorporate what they've said to you. And one thing that I often say when I talk about editing is you want to be careful not to assume that because a beta reader told you you should do this, that you actually should do this. You should address their concern, but you are in charge of what is the right solution to that concern. So, if they say, I was confused by these two characters and I think you should cut one, well, you have lots of options. Yes, you could cut one. You could make them more different. You could actually even make them more similar so that the reader sort of understands them as reflections of each other. Maybe you take these characters and you make them sisters instead of separate characters, and now we understand them kind of as a group, and because they are similar in one way, we kind of see the distinctions between them more clearly. So yeah, that is my advice. Get some beta readers and then you take control. Luca asks, what is my favorite snowbound place? A ship, a plane, a bus? Okay, so I really love I just love places that I haven't seen. Like places that you think that your reader, that may be kind of new to your reader, like a cruise ship, or a perhaps a mountain chalet, perhaps a particular country, a venue in a particular country that you think would be really exciting to show to readers. Um, Planes and buses. Planes are also nice because there's just no getting on and or off them. So it is a very nice contained snowbound mystery. But I really love, if you're going to do a snowbound mystery, I love the idea of using that as an opportunity to share a fantastic locale with your readers. So let's see. Lennox Williams Art says, I'm working on a novel and I got the crime figured out. But I have no idea how to get the coppers on the trail. Okay, so well, you're going to have to give them a clue. So the probably what you need to do is to think about exactly what happened during the crime. What locations did your villain visit? What specific lies did he tell? What tools did he need? What accomplices did he have to enlist? And then think about what clues he could have left behind at each of those points. And this is something we dig very deep into on in my 8-week course that I'm running starting next week, which is Simple Mystery. So I am actually, I am going to, in the background here, I'm going to search up my link and I'm going to drop that link into the chat just in case anybody wants to check it out. I know I've been talking about this kind of all week in all of my social media places. So you probably, if you're interested, you've probably already heard of it, but it is a course where we really dig deep on how exactly to generate clues, how exactly to put people on the trail of your villain. And there's a lot more to it than that. It is really a process where I take you from the very beginning, the germ of an idea for your book, all the way to a finished outline with all of your scenes, with a list of all of your scenes, all of your clues, which scenes those clues will be put into, and how they will be hidden in plain sight so that your reader isn't too aware of exactly where you're heading with the book. So yeah, so the link is in the chat now. And yeah, if anybody would like to check that out, it is a great it's a great course, I feel. I genuinely do. And that's based on the feedback that I'm getting from people. And you can also shoot me a line at jane@fictiontechnician.com if you just want to ask a couple of questions about it. Okay, so let's see. Avian asks, I know Kitty Callahan is a detective in 1920 Chicago, progressive for that time period. How do you portray a progressive female character but stay true to the time period? So I think you have to, what do I want to say about this? This kind of ties into one of the pre-submitted questions, which was what are cozy tropes that irritate me? And one of the ones that actually irritates me is when characters are wildly ahistorical, when they are, a woman who takes pride in flaunting her sexual promiscuity in Victorian England. And I always feel like I don't believe you, and this isn't history. But that being said, when we write in historical periods, we often do have to kind of update. We have to use characters that are in line with our own morals. I'm not going to write a character who I wouldn't feel proud of, and that often means that some historical attitudes need to be fudged or changed or something. So I think what you want to do when you're writing a character is you want to be honest about what the period was like. You don't want them to be unaware of the challenges people faced with racism, with sexism. You don't want them to be unaware of what the prevailing attitude is. But, you just want to have your character treat people with respect. And that is my best advice for trying to stay true to his history, but also stay true to, yourself as a writer and the kind of characters that you would be proud to display on the page. Let me read the whole question because it was so interesting and I spent all day yesterday thinking about this. Okay. Hello. I wanted to ask how you can add character interactions or a romantic subplot into a mystery without it feeling like wasted time to the reader because the investigation isn't technically developing further. Okay, let's get into it. So let's start by talking about the Born identity. So I don't know how many of you guys have seen this. This is I think it's like a 25-year-old movie now. But the Bourne identity deals with Matt Damon as Jason Bourne, who is a spy who has lost his memory. And so he doesn't know that he's a spy at the beginning of the movie. And he has to figure out what's going on with his life, what was the assignment he was working on, and why are all these people trying to kill him. And there is a romance plot in that. And, the romance does have some scenes where we slow things down and we have some kissy kissy and we have some talk. And this is, so even in a very, very action packed movie with lots of fights and lots of chases and stuff, we still do need to slow it down sometimes. And that's because, your audience, they may think that they came to the movie just for action, but in fact, we don't want and we can't endure just unrelenting action or unrelenting progress along any particular path, whether that's investigation, a nice cerebral investigation, or action or whatever. We kind of need some breaks. So I would not think of this as wasted time for the reader. I would think of it as downtime. And you kind of have to provide your reader with downtime. I mean, you may say, well, I'm writing a book. Can't they simply have downtime by putting down the book for a while? But the problem with that is then, if they're putting down the book with the feeling of, oh, I just need a break from this, it's hard for them to ever return to that book with a feeling of enthusiasm. So we need to provide them little breaks, and the romance or character subplot, character change story, these are all great ways to do this. But by that, I do not mean that that these things, the investigation and the romance or character subplot, should be entirely separate, entirely independent. They should kind of be interdependent. So let's go back to the Bourne identity. So these two stories are totally interdependent. She gets in trouble and he has to rescue her. He needs some information from a place where they already know his face and she goes in and gets it. He winds up having to teach her a couple of little tricks of spy tradecraft. And then we as the audience get to learn them without getting an info dump. And so it is very easy to find, and if all of these scenes are kind of spiced up with a little bit of romantic tension, so much the better. And yeah, so it is very easy for you to find ways for your romance and your plot to coincide. Getting into danger and having the love interest save your sleuth, or having your sleuth save the love interest, that is always very fun and a good, preceding scene to some nice kissy face stuff. And having also a lot of sleuthing scenes, a lot of searches, a lot of interrogations are best done with a couple of characters, because these two characters have their differing perspectives that they can offer on the case. They each have their different skills that they can bring to the search. So I don't think it's hard to get your other characters in on the sleuthing action. And then another point I wanted to make here is that in a good romance story, you're going to have a conflict keeping your characters apart. This might be a conflict between them, like they have different attitudes on something, or it can just be something exterior to them. It can be that their families disapprove of their match, or it can be that it can be almost anything, but it's some conflict keeping them apart. And it's very easy to make the case be that conflict. It could be that your sleuth and her love interest have differing perspectives on things. He thinks that suspect A is guilty, and she thinks that suspect A is innocent and in need of their protection. Or he thinks that the case is too dangerous to pursue, and she thinks that the case is too important to not pursue. Or, it could be that he is one of her suspects and he seems really nice and he's kind of into her, but there's this whole problem where maybe possibly he's a murderer. Or it could be that he's the law enforcement officer investigating the case and he thinks she may be a suspect. So there are lots of ways that the case can provide a very juicy, very spicy conflict to your love story. So that is all my thoughts about that, and I think it's I always love a great love story in a mystery, and I don't think it's wasted time by any means. Um, uh, let's see. So Luca asks, may I ask how you get much time to write your novels? I can't focus for a couple of hours. So it is very challenging. So I am a homeschooling mom. I also do this YouTube channel, and I'm really trying to do a push right now where I am posting every single week because I just want this channel to be a great resource for all of you guys, and I do want it to grow, and posting every week definitely does help with that. So it is hard for me to find time to write, and I just have to be very disciplined about when I have time to write. That's what happens. I can't say that I always am good about instituting that self-discipline. It is still a challenge for me to make everything happen the way I want. And but I just keep working because it is my thing. It is what I do and what I will always be doing. So I'm going to go back to a couple of the pre-submitted questions. Let me just see where I am. All right. Okay. What are your tips for writing suspect interviews? Okay. So this goes back to what I just said about romance, which is that every scene doesn't have to be all business. You can mix some things up in there. You can have conflict between the suspect she's interviewing and the sleuth. You can have romance between the suspect she's interviewing and the sleuth. And another thing I want to suggest is that you really think about, I have a couple of videos where I talk about in every scene, your protagonist should want something, and the answer to do they get what they want should be yes, no, a consequence, or yes, but a consequence, or no, and furthermore, a consequence. So that is a tip I picked up from from How to Write Killer Fiction by, why can't I remember the name of the, Carolyn Wheat. How to Write Killer Fiction by Carolyn Wheat. And it's a great tip that I use all the time. And so perhaps in an interview scene, we would say, well, what does my character want? She wants to figure out what this character was doing during the time of the murder. And then, so if the answer to does she get what she wants is yes, but, it might be yes, but she makes this character an enemy. And now she's going to have to deal with consequences throughout the rest of the plot. Or it might be no, and furthermore, she makes the character an enemy, or no, and furthermore, she is put on the spot by the suspect and forced to reveal something that she didn't want to, or anything. But all of this whole question from Carolyn Wheat is just really the key to a lot of really spicy, surprising scenes that are really fun. So that is my advice for writing suspect interviews. Oh, wait, one more little bit of suspect interview stuff. So from time to time, Well, no, a lot. You are writing a sleuth who does not actually have the authority to question other people. Maybe your sleuth is a high school student, or maybe she is a caterer or whatever, and she doesn't really have the authority to compel answers or even attention from other people. And so, one really good tactic is to, instead of have her say, well, where were you at the time of the murder? She can instead state an assumption. She can say, um, you know, and you were kissing in the pool room with so and so at the time of the murder. And then the suspect will say, I certainly was not. I was doing this. And now your sleuth has the information she needs. But she didn't have to ask the question and get rebuffed from a suspect who does not actually have to answer her. So I'm going to go back to comments. Let's see. All right, so Jennifer Brown asks, I'm new to writing mystery type novels. My question is, how much on-page violence is too much for a cozy mystery? So like a lot of things, it's a bit of a judgment call. I would All right, here's where I would draw the line in a cozy. I would absolutely draw the line at any violence towards children. I think that that is kind of over the line for a lot of cozy readers. I am comfortable writing blood. I'm comfortable writing injuries. I am not comfortable in a cozy writing too much fear. And so I would not, for example, let's say I was writing a murder scene in a cozy. So my victim is she's working in her garden and she's about to be crept up on by the killer. I would not have this be a scene where he creeps up on her and she's nervous and she feels frightened, and then she looks around and she sees him and she tries to scramble across the ground, but he's faster than her and he grabs her by her ankles and he pulls her back. I would not do that. That would not be cozy. I would have him bean her over the head and cut to black. So because it's really, when we talk about how much violence is too much violence for cozy mystery, we're talking about the emotional experience the reader wants to have while they're reading, which is typically, it's cozy. It's a cup of hot chocolate and a novel, cozy. And so they often don't want to feel a lot of emotional distress for the victim. But I don't mind writing pools of blood. I don't even mind writing victim gasps out their last words, but it's probably, again, it's not going to be anything very emotionally painful. It's not going to be, you know, take care of my children, or, or great regret or grief. And they're not going to actually even indicate that much that they're in agony, although they probably would be. But yeah, it's more about the emotional thing than so much than the physical thing. Oddly, when we talk about how much violence is too much, it's mostly about the emotions that you don't want to evoke in your reader. See, I'm going to go back to my pre-submitted questions. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to read this one again. Okay. Right. So Ara Edmonds asked, you have more info than anyone I've run into about writing, about plotting, etc. I believe you went to college, but this knowledge you have seems to be from self-study. How did you set about doing this? Okay. So yes, I went to college. I went to college as a creative writing major. And if I were to live my life again, I don't think I'd pull that thread out of the tapestry of my life, because it was such a great time and I met so many people I loved, and I loved it. I loved the experience of being in college. But if I were to do it again, I would go to college with the explicit understanding that my growth as a writer was entirely on my own lookout. And perhaps the attitude that everyone should have about their education. It's entirely on your own lookout. Because I feel like there were things I did in college that were valuable, and but there's a lot about writing that I simply did not learn in college. I did not learn story structure. I did not learn marketing. I did not learn publishing. And I genuinely feel like that is essential to the job of a writer, and that colleges should either teach it or perhaps, stop giving people the impression that they are going to prepare them for a career in writing. So I do feel that if you are going to be a writer, you are going to have to be, to some extent, an autodidact. That is a self-taught person, by which I don't mean that you have to sit down and puzzle everything out on your own lonesome. But you should be seeking teachers. You should be seeking teachers like Blake Snyder, who wrote Save the Cat. You should be seeking, what was it that I wanted to say here? Online courses like my course, Simple Mystery, workshops at your local library, and you should be learning to read like a writer, which is that you read with the intention of figuring out how does this whole thing work? How was I surprised by this scene, and how could I do the same thing? And how did this romance become so important to me, and how could I do the same thing for my readers? So I have, so here's a list of some of the resources that I have used to accumulate knowledge about writing. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, Writing the Breakout Novel, Secrets of Story by Matt Bird, which is phenomenal. Self-editing for fiction writers, and all the books by K.M. Weiland. And then those are all writing things, writing and editing things. And then David Gaughran also is somebody who I really want to encourage you to follow. He does advice about marketing for writers. So, which is, it's part of the writer's education, is learning to handle the business side of things. So those are all resources that I would really recommend to you. They have served me very, very well. And and I want to encourage you to just, keep learning. Oh, and then the other thing I wanted to say about being self-taught is that starting the YouTube channel was really a big step forward in this process. So I started the YouTube channel, and if you go back to my very early videos, which are very rough, you'll see that I'm talking mostly about other people's ideas. I'm talking about Save the Cat. I'm sharing the resources I have learned from. But then as I began needing to come up with more and more content for the channel, I began developing my own ideas, and it just kind of happened magically. A lot of the ideas that I have about mystery writing were developed because I wanted to write a video about locked room murders. And then I started analyzing. I started rewatching locked room murders, analyzing, figuring things out, and then figuring them out in a way that I could express them clearly to other people. And that was a big step forward. So I would say read the stuff, seek the teachers, but also do something. Maybe what you need to do is start a YouTube channel, but maybe what you need to do is just start your first book. And, like the first videos on my YouTube channel, the first part of that effort may be, it may be a little rough. But doing stuff, forcing yourself to produce material, is a great way to force yourself to learn. I'm going to click back over to comments. Let's see. All right, so Lucas says, a while back, I read a boxcar children book where the culprit was someone who appeared in the final chapter of the book. It makes me wonder, when should you put your culprit in your mystery book? I would never introduce them in the last chapter. I feel like, you want to have that, it was him all along feeling, and then he needs to have been there all along, or at least I would say no later than the halfway point, and ideally no later than the 1/4 point. That would be my feeling for when a villain should be introduced. Avion says, I love that your schooling skill is paired with your creative writing background to make your channel unique and fresh. I always find myself taking notes. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's so awesome to hear. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Where was I in my pre-submitted questions? Okay. What are your favorite and least favorite cozy tropes? What are ways people can use tropes in ways that feel unpredictable and unique? Okay. So asking me about my favorite and least favorite is kind of tough because I kind of like it all. I kind of like all the cozy stuff. I like the sexy officers who your sleuth gets interested in. I like I like twists. I like big reveals. Here are a couple things I don't like. So I already mentioned I don't like it when I feel that things are ahistorical. And it's hard to get every detail right, by the way, as a historical writer. Like, you're never really going to feel the way that people at the time felt. You're never really going to have a full picture. But I hate it when I can spot attitudes that simply feel ahistorical to me. And there's yeah. And I also hate it when there's kind of a horrible character in the cozy who seems to be there just so that your sleuth can score easy moral wins over them. It's a mean girl character or whatever, and there's no kind of justification for why she's so terrible to people. But she's just kind of there to be horrible and to be made fun of, and it's not my thing. Let's see. And okay. Oh, and I love snowbound mysteries. That is a trope that just just really speaks to me. And and I think I mentioned this earlier in the stream. I think one of the things I love about that is that it's often a great reason to enjoy some really unique locales, and to kind of put a lot of pressure on the people who are in them. Okay. And then, she asked, so what are ways people can use tropes in ways that feel unpredictable and unique? Okay. So here I want to quote from Matt Bird, who is a blogger who I follow. His blog is called Secrets of Story. And earlier in the live stream, I recommended his book, Secrets of Story. It's really, really good. And he says that it's often really satisfying when you validate some of the expectations people had regarding to a trope, but overturn some others. So an example he uses here is Frozen, which is a nice fairy tale about princesses and princes, and there's a romance, but the princesses don't wind up with the prince. The prince is actually evil. So there's a lot of validated assumptions about the trope, but there's also that violated assumption. The prince is not the romantic love interest. And so I would say one thing you can do is to look at the trope that you want to use and ask. So we talk about this on my channel. We talk about a way to create plot twists is to list the assumptions inherent in the premise and then ask yourself, what are ways that you could violate that assumption? So, let's say we're going to use the trope where my sleuth looks guilty of murder. Well, I love that trope. I think that's super fun. So one of the assumptions in that trope is that my sleuth is in fact innocent, and I could violate that assumption. I could have my sleuth actually be guilty, and I could reveal that perhaps she has an altered memory, allowing her to believe she was innocent. I could reveal that she has a reason for keeping this information from the reader, or that she has in fact lied. Although if you have your viewpoint character lie to the reader, you always want to have them do it in a very specific way that that isn't just straight up lying. It's sort of the creation of a unreliable narrator. And so that is a way that you can use tropes in a way that feels unpredictable or unique. Another thing you can do is just change the environment or one major aspect of the trope. So if you look at Star Wars, the original Star Wars, that's all the characters are very tropey characters. We've got a farm boy, we've got a princess, we've got a wizard in the form of Obi-Wan Kenobi, we've got a roguish scoundrel. These are all incredibly tropey characters, but putting them in that space environment made them feel very fresh. And so that is a way that you can kind of make a trope feel fresh. And then the other thing I want to say is that it's just a matter of approaching it thoughtfully and adding detail and getting your heart into the story. So if you look at Harry Potter, those are also very tropey characters. Dumbledore is a very strong trope of the ancient wizard, and McGonagall is the stern schoolmistress. These are very kind of familiar character types. But what makes it feel fresh and magical and engaging is just the level of detail in the world and the the level of attention that Rowling gives to her whole story. So so using a trope thoughtlessly versus thoughtfully is kind of like throwing on your usual jean jacket thoughtlessly just over whatever you're wearing versus pairing it with like a nice polka dot dress and some special jewelry or whatever. It just, in the latter case where you're pairing it with the right things, it looks meaningful and chosen and like it's part of a larger design. And if you're just kind of tossing it on, then it doesn't look like much of anything. So yeah, so that's my last advice about using tropes in ways that feel unique is just put your heart into it. Just give it your all, and it will wind up affecting people, because the fact is we like these tropey characters. We like the ancient wizard character because it speaks to us on some level. It is resonant. We are interested in sage characters. We're interested in all of these character archetypes, and just putting a lot of detail around them and putting your heart into it makes them come alive for us. All right, I'm going to click back to comments. I do have, wow, a lot more questions. So I'm going to keep going. Let's see. Okay, so John asks, how do you work the misdirection? The detective eliminates suspects while keeping the suspense going. I'm struggling with keeping pressure on the sleuth to solve above their original motive to solve. Okay. So sorry, let me think about this for a moment. So the detective eliminates suspects while keeping the suspense going. So often what you want to do to kind of keep the suspense going despite the fact that suspects are being eliminated is have the actual villain be someone who never was considered a suspect at all. So I have a video I released about a month ago called 3 Ways to Hide the Villain in Plain Sight, which are to make him a investigator on the case, or perhaps to give him a double identity, or to have him be part of a subplot that seems extraneous to the investigation. I called that a sidecar subplot. So I would watch that video. That's 3 ways to do it, but certainly not the only ones. But often what you want to do is keep the actual villain from really being suspected, to kind of work your misdirection. And Yeah, I'm struggling with keeping pressure on the sleuth to solve above their original motive to solve. So, I think often you want to give them an emotional reason to connect with the case. You want to have them connect with the victim or with somebody who's been affected by the case. And well, there are lots of motives that your sleuth can have to solve the mystery. Actually, I did a video on that about 3 weeks ago, which was called 13 Reasons Why Your Sleuth Might Investigate. And that's something that you might want to check out and just make sure that the reason that your sleuth has to solve is just something that's genuinely compelling to them. The Jaded Filmmaker says, "Hi, Jane." Hi. Let's see. And okay. Pamela says, "An agent told me readers want to have warm weather settings in cozies. Settings in wintry places don't sell well. True or not, in your opinion?" Well, I don't know. I have to assume that the agent has some information that she's acting on when she's telling you that. So I don't want to contradict her. But this is not something I have ever thought about with relation to a book I was reading or to something I was writing. As a writer, I want to be shown a delightful world. And you know, it would be fine for me for that to be a cold world. Um One book series that I can think of in particular that used cold quite a bit was the Nils Shapiro series um, by Matt Goldman. Although that is not a cozy, that's a little bit of a grittier mystery, but I I just don't have the information that she's acting on. She may have some sales figures that she's looking at that tell her this story, but it's not something I've ever thought about as a reader. And Phoebe says, "Thank you for answering my question. You are so welcome." Okay. Kelnius says, "How do you make a good Watson slash sidekick? I'm working on a story where a sidekick was a literal bully, but I feel the character dynamic keeps interrupting the narrative." Okay. Well, I think it is fine for your sleuth to have some conflict with their sidekick, to have him have been a bully, and for them to have to, you know, come to sort of some sort of understanding. I think often you want to make sure that your sidekick has something to add to the something to bring to the table. So the three things that I try to give sidekicks potentially are access to something in particular. This is why law enforcement officers make such great love interests, because they have access to all of that police information. Um, uh, they can have a skill. They can have access, skills, and just knowledge of things. Oh, and they can also have resources. So they could perhaps be your sleuth's money bags. But they should probably have something to bring to the table that makes them necessary as part of the investigation, and that gives them some moments to shine, some moments to contribute. Um, all right. Luca asks, in whodunits, what's your favorite weapon your culprit could use? Mine is poison, as it can be slipped into anything. I mean, poison is fantastic. I don't have a favorite weapon. I guess I would say the weapon that supports the narrative the villain is trying to create. So we've talked about this quite a bit. Narrative murders are murders in which the villain has set up the crime in such a way that it looks like a particular thing. It looks like a car accident. It looks like, a robbery gone bad. And so the weapon that I like best is the one that tells a really strong narrative. All right. And I have a few more pre-submitted questions, so I'm just going to get through as many of these as I can before my kids go crazy. All right. All right. How do you balance group scenes? Let me read this whole question, because this was also a really interesting one. Um, and I know. Okay. Hello, Jane. I'm writing a mystery in which a murder happens at a party during a thunderstorm, so all 10-ish of my characters are stuck in the same place at the same time. I tend to struggle with balancing group scenes. When I write a scene, I always worry about things being too repetitive with each of the characters. Something happens, and then character A responds, and then character B, and then C. Similarly, in some scenes, certain characters don't really contribute anything to the scene. Should they just be in the background, or should I write them off somewhere else if they're not being used? Um, Okay, so I had a similar question in the last time I ran Simple Mystery. One of my students asked a question about this. She was writing sort of a medieval theater scene where there were just actors and servants and courtiers and food and music and everything. And she was like, "How do I convey all of this?" And what I told her was that it is okay for your character to narrow in and focus on the most important stimuli to her. So and this is what we do at a party. We break off into groups of conversation. This is what we would do if you were walking in the jungle and there are all these stimuli coming at you, but then you see something that actually gets your attention. You see like a little twitch of a tiger tail. Suddenly your brain, everything else floats away, and your brain is just tiger, 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 tiger. Um, we focus in on the stimuli that matters most to us. So I think it is okay to for your character to kind of focus on what matters most and let the rest of it sort of blend into the background. I also think that it should be easy for you to find ways to separate these characters. Maybe they need to search the house because there's some sort of threat. Maybe they need to find medical supplies or food because there's some sort of emergency. Maybe they need to board up the windows because there's a weather event coming. But I think that you can find ways to separate out the characters if you need to have people speak privately or do things that would be hard to do in a group of 10 people. And the last piece of advice I want to give you is to do what I do when there's a thing I don't know how to do, which is look for people who have done it and try to break down and analyze what they have done. So the two books I want to recommend to you are And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which starts with 10 people alone on a novel, and it goes down as people get picked off by the killer. But that's a lot of people, and there are several group scenes, and you can kind of see how she does it in those books. And In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware, which is like your book, it is several characters in a cabin together, and there are a lot of party scenes. And so I would just read through those with the idea that you're going to uncover some secrets that you can use. All right. All right. Do you have any advice or resources that are specific to non-fatal crimes? So this is a question from a viewer who is working on a book but not a mystery. And I always think it is super cool when people from other genres find my channel helpful. And the more it happens, the more I see that actually a lot of books have mysteries at their heart. Maybe you're writing a sci-fi book where you need to understand the behavior of some aliens, and so that is a mystery. Or you're writing a romance where you need to find out why, your character needs to find out how the villain has undermined your character's cattle farm so that she's put in a terrible position. Whatever. A lot of books have mysteries in them, and the way that you provide clues for and investigate non-fatal crimes is exactly the way that you would for a murder. It's precisely the same. So we talked about this earlier in the live stream. What you're going to do is just think about all the things that your character did while committing that crime. So let's say that you are writing a fantasy where one of your characters has been traitorously communicating with the king of another kingdom. Well, you're just going to ask, what are all the things he had to do? Whose help did he need? What items did he use? Where did he go? What lies did he tell? And then all of those will help you come up with the clues that that you will need to make this mystery feel satisfying at the end, where your reader says, oh, of course it was him, you know. All right. Any advice on writing a trilogy? So here is what I would do if I wanted to write a trilogy. I would just make sure I had like the basics of all 3 books before I committed myself to stuff in book 1. I would make sure that I had, in particular, the character arcs of each of the 3 books at least basically planned out, at least to the point of understanding what my character's chronic issue was going to be in each book. And the chronic issue is just the long-standing problem that is kind of weighing your character down, and which solving the case will give her the opportunity to overcome. So a book I want to recommend to you is Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Weiland. And that is a fantastic book on character arcs. And in particular, I know there is a part where she breaks down very specifically how 3 character arcs can fit into one kind of overarching character transition. So I would check that out. I would read in particular the part on trilogies, and I would just try to understand what my character development was going to be in each book, and make sure that I knew kind of the basics of where the story will end up, so that I don't get myself into too much trouble. Okay, this is the last of my pre-submitted questions. How much of a difference is there between cozy mysteries and traditional mysteries? So these are really marketing terms, which all genre names are marketing terms. They are, so that readers will understand what they're buying, and so that you will understand reader expectations. And so I would say they're so close, because I think the reader group for cozy mysteries and traditional mysteries is so close, and there's a lot of overlap between them. So when I hear cozy, I think the book is more likely to have humor. It's more likely to have romance. It's more likely to be sort of light and non-violent. And when I hear traditional, I think it is more likely to have a large number of suspects. It is more likely to have a lot of interrogation scenes and very, specific interactions of the characters while she was in the billiard room, while he was watching from the balcony, and therefore they saw each other. But the fact is, I think these things are almost the same. I think they are both low violence. I think they are both, I think they're almost the same. It's just the word cozy more tends to suggest humor and romance, although not every cozy is like that. So they're 2 terms with a lot of overlap, actually. And I'm going to click back to my comments. And, Juanita's Creative Corner asks, will the stream be available as a replay? Yes, it will. It will be up. And, let's see. I think I have 2 more questions here, and then that's going to be it. So, probably no more questions from here on in, but I'm going to answer these 2. So Avian asks, could you mistake a serrated craft scissors knitting for a serrated kitchen knife? When they did this in a murder reveal, I didn't understand how they could make a scissors stab for a knife stab. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, okay. Cozies probably are also the mystery genre that is most likely to play fast and loose with the actual logistics of crime scenes in order to make a fun twist work. So yeah, I also remember a different mystery where there was a character stabbed with scissors, and it was 2 points, and I was like, this is the most awkward thing I can possibly imagine trying to do in the heat of the moment. Um, so yeah, I would find that a little bit of a stretch, but that's not to say that you couldn't do it if it felt really, really right for your book. All right. And I think one last question, which is from John Martin. He says, what's a way to keep the villain's reveal, if someone previously unsuspected, from not cheating the reader? How would you structure clues? Okay, so this is, yeah, exactly. We don't want to cheat the reader. We want them to have that, of course, moment where they are surprised, but then immediately understand why it works. So I think, one way you can do that is, well, you want to have those clues in there. You want to have clues that this person would be capable of this crime, would be benefited by this crime, and clues that specifically tie them to the crime. And one way that you can do that is have the sleuth kind of recapitulate all those clues at the end. This is, in fact, a very, very common thing to do with mysteries, is at the end, the sleuth will say what happened, and they'll tell you how they knew. They'll give you each of the clues. And so that lets your mind, that if you missed the clues when you're reading, that lets your mind recall them and get that, of course, feeling that you need to have at the end of the big reveal. Let's see. All right, I am going to take one last question, which is, how can you make a killer sympathetic? And I mean, the short answer is they just have to feel stuff. They just have to, well, all right. Happy people, as a rule, don't commit murder. Your villain is in pain for some reason. They feel they have been cheated, or they feel they have been harmed, or possibly they have been cheated or harmed. So, that is the way to make a killer sympathetic, is just let them show you how they feel. It doesn't mean that they're right, obviously, to have done what they've done, but it allows you to feel empathy for their pain. Okay, so I am just so grateful for those of you who have chosen to spend this hour with me, actually this hour and 15 minutes. I really love getting to chat with you guys, and I really appreciate all of these great questions. This was just an amazing time for me. And I am going to put the link for my course into the chat one more time, just right at the end. It is a really fun course, and we are getting started on Monday. So if you feel like shooting me a line about the course and asking some questions, it's jane@fictiontechnician.com, and we'll just chat about it, because we're getting started soon. All right. Thank you all so much. Mwah. Love you.